If you don't believe in ghosts, I guarantee I can change that after telling you about an experience I had at an abandoned hospital that is said to be haunted. I was skeptical of how true that was at first until I went to the building for myself and saw something that I still can't explain to this day. So this is exactly what happened. Have you ever heard a story so many times that you just had to find out if it was true for yourself? That's how I was with Linda Vista Hospital. If you've never heard of this place before, let me tell you a little bit about it. Linda Vista Hospital is an old abandoned building in Los Angeles that many people believe is haunted. The reason for this is that this hospital had a bad reputation of medical mistreatment over the years, leading to many people passing away inside this building. So since it's closed, there's all sorts of crazy things people say they experienced while being inside here, with one of the creepiest stories being about a baby that people say they can either hear crying or see crawling on the floor. Now I live like 20 minutes away from this abandoned place, and I love spooky stuff, so I had to go investigate to see if this was real for myself. Everyone I asked about it mentioned the same stuff. Lights turning on by themselves in a building with no electricity, voices even though they were the only ones in there. At first I thought they were just over dramatizing their experiences to make it sound more spooky, but then one of the people that went there that I talked to said something that really caught my attention. So the person I was talking to was named Noah, and Noah, along with a couple other buddies, went to explore this abandoned hospital last summer. And he's a pretty sarcastic guy. Like, I've never seen him be too serious until I asked him about this hospital. Because with the most straight face ever, he swore to me that he saw a small shadow dart across the hallway while inside there. He said it was definitely shaped like a kid, but it moved so quickly that he couldn't verify anything, and that's all he saw that night. So now I was like, okay, I might actually have to believe what everyone's saying about this place. Noah's story made me even more curious, so I started watching some YouTube videos about Linda Vista Hospital. People exploring the place, setting up ghost hunting equipment, the usual stuff. And I noticed something weird. In everyone's videos, they always said something about a baby. Whether it was them hearing what sounded like crying noises or actually physically seeing something that looked like a baby, that was the common occurrence with all these stories. So that's when I decided, I need to check it out for myself. I figured the only way to know if these people were lying or not for sure was to go to this place myself and see it with my own two eyes. Looking back, that was not the smartest idea. And if I could have made that choice again, I would have never gone. But I can't do that because I was so intrigued to find out the truth. Was this baby real? I didn't know what I believed. So I made a plan to go visit Linda Vista Hospital on a Friday night. I asked my friend Carlos to come with me, and at first, he was all excited about it because he loved watching ghost hunting shows and everything like that. But after I told him the actual name of the hospital, I think he must have looked into it for himself. Carlos texted me an hour before we were supposed to meet saying, "Something came up, can't make it tonight. Sorry." Carlos, if you're watching this, I know you were lying. I guess now is also a good time to say that I wasn't sick when I skipped out on your birthday party. I just didn't want to go because it was at Chuck E. Cheese, and I was terrified of that dang mouse when I was 8. Anyways, enough personal talk. Back to the story. Carlos backing out made me want to flunk too, but I was already so mentally prepared for this that I decided I was just gonna go alone. So I grabbed my stuff and headed out. Part of me was already regretting this decision, knowing in the back of my mind that something bad was just bound to happen. But the other part of me couldn't escape figuring out the truth to all these stories. The whole drive there, I kept going back and forth in my head. Do I keep going or do I turn back around? I'm not built for this. What am I doing? I should leave. But I really want to find out what's going on there. I need to keep going. Well, what if there's dangerous people inside there and they do something bad to me? All these thoughts raced through my mind, but I decided to just do the stupid thing and thug it out. When I finally arrived, the hospital looked even more creepy than in the pictures I saw online. There were boarded up windows and graffiti everywhere. Glass shattered all over the place. Not where you would typically want to spend your Friday night. I stood there for a minute, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other, just staring up at Linda Vista Hospital. This was the last chance I had to turn back. It was now or never, but I kept walking. I was about to figure out if these legends were true. It was time to go inside. Getting into Linda Vista Hospital was surprisingly easy. There was this broken window on the first floor where the board had been pulled off. You could tell it was where everyone else would enter because there was scuff marks on the wall around it. The moment I stepped inside, it felt like somebody put a heavy blanket all over my body. The air was thick and gross. It smelled like mold. Like, have you ever been inside the house of your friend that doesn't touch grass? That's what it smelled like in there. And no, before you guys say anything, I am not that friend, okay? I promise. I promise. I swept my flashlight around and everything it hit looked super creepy. The light bounced off peeling paint on the ceiling that looked like dead skin. Broken glass covered parts of the floor, and when my flashlight would reflect off of it, I would see these weird shadows, which made me assume this is just the things people would see inside here and assume was a ghost. But like I said, everyone always talked about the baby, so I knew there had to be more to the story. As I started walking through the building, It was impossible to avoid the glass. I tried to walk super quietly, just in case there was anyone else in the building, but I kept accidentally stepping on the glass and it would make a crunching noise every time. It was the only noise inside that hospital, so it was pretty much like I was saying, "Hey ghost, I'm here if any of you want to touch me." Wait, no, that's not what I meant. Don't touch me. I'm here if any of you guys want to haunt me. That's not good either. I don't know what I'm saying. That's pretty much what the glass was signaling to them though. And every time I wasn't stepping on the glass making a loud noise, I would hear these creaking noises coming from above me. But I told myself, it's probably just the wind, or maybe an animal, some rats or something. Which is funny to think now because I wish it was just those things. As I walked further through the building, I would see graffiti all over the place. Some was just your typical tags, writing their names and stuff like that. But some of it was way creepier. There were warnings scratched into the walls and painted in big letters. Some of the phrases were, "Get out," and "She watches," and another one said, "They hear you." I tried to laugh it off, but it just added to the spooky ambiance. As I walked deeper into the hospital, the feeling of being watched got way stronger. Like someone was following right behind me, just staying out of my line of sight. I kept spinning around, expecting to catch someone, but the hallway was always empty. There were so many old rooms in this building that I knew someone could be inside any of these. And just as that paranoia started to kick in, things went south. First thing that happened, my flashlight started flickering. It was brand new with fresh batteries, yet it kept dimming and brightening for some reason. I smacked it against my palm, and that would fix it for a couple minutes before it started to flicker again. After dealing with this problem, the first thing that really started to make me believe all those stories I heard happened. A noise coming from one of the empty rooms. Not a creaking sound or rats scurrying this time. No, because this noise almost sounded like humming. It was soft, but it was definitely there. Way too clear for me to be mistaking it for something else. I first tried rationalizing it by saying, well, maybe it's just a bigger animal than a rat. Maybe it's a raccoon. But last time I checked, outside of Alvin and the Chipmunks, I don't think any animals can sing like that. So I stood there, just trying to really lock in on that noise and explain it to myself. By the time this was going on, I was on the 3rd story of the building. And that's when my flashlight beam caught something on the floor that made my heart drop into my stomach. A line of small footprints in the dust. They weren't mine. They were way too small. They were almost the size of a kid's footprints. And they were heading toward the stairwell to the next floor. Exactly where everyone said the ghost kid hung out. Things started to feel too real now. I stood there at those footprints with my mind racing. This had to be a prank, right? Someone's just messing with me. People knew about the fake conspiracies, so they just put baby marks on the ground to scare people. But the weird thing was, in all the stories I heard about this place, I never once saw anyone mention footprints. So these must have been new, which meant I only had one choice: follow them. Each step I took made me more nervous, but I couldn't stop. Now, any sort of movement or sound startled me. I jumped every time my flashlight reflected off the glass. When I reached the 4th floor, the footprints continued down the hallway. They led exactly to where I was afraid they would, the surgical wing. Right to the place where everyone said they saw the ghost kid. What are the chances, right? I almost turned around right there. But something in my mind was telling me, you're too far deep. You have to figure out the truth now. So I kept going. The surgical wing was way worse than the rest of the hospital. It was like walking onto the set of a horror movie. There were these old operating tables still bolted to the floor. Some of them had crusty stains on them that I really didn't want to think about. And rusty equipment was scattered everywhere. Scissors, metal trays, and these weird clamp things that looked like torture devices. The footprints didn't stop. They kept going down this floor and led into a room at the end of the hall. The door to this room was halfway open, and when entering inside it, I could see that it was used for kids. There were these faded cartoon characters painted on the walls, Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, things like that. But they were all peeling and discolored, which made it look way more creepy. The part that spooked me out the most was not knowing whether these drawings were here from people that just visited the hospital after it was abandoned, or if they were still here from when it was in use. But I pushed the door open a little more and shined my light around. That's when I saw an old wooden rocking chair sitting in the corner. It looked totally out of place among all the metal hospital furniture. Something about that chair just felt wrong. As I stood in the doorway looking at it, the air started to change. It felt like the temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. I started to get goosebumps on me, which was not normal for being in Southern California in June. I decided I saw enough. This was starting to get too weird for me, and I was freaking out. I was about to turn around and leave until something happened that wouldn't let me do that. The rocking chair moved. Not like it fell over or something. No, it started rocking back and forth, super slow at first, then it picked up speed, as if someone was literally sitting in it. But obviously, no one was there. I checked for open windows, thinking maybe a breeze just came in, but they were all boarded up. But it was such a subtle rocking that once again, I couldn't tell if it was actually happening or it was just my brain imagining more stuff. I backed away slowly, not wanting to find out the answer to that question, one step at a time, making sure to not turn my back on that rocking chair. You know that feeling when you're watching a horror movie and you're screaming at the television, telling the character to not go inside that creepy room? I became that character, standing there with footprints right in front of me and a chair totally rocking by itself. Any normal person would have ran away, but I'm pretty sure I have some undiagnosed mental disorders, so I didn't. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was curiosity, but I stood there and then I did something even dumber. I kept following the footprints. As I followed them to the next floor, I realized this was the creepiest one yet, because a light at the end of this hallway was flickering off and on in one of the rooms, which didn't make a lot of sense because based off everything I saw so far, this place had no electricity. It was nighttime and there weren't any lights on outside of the building, so how was this light flickering? Trying my best to act like I know literally anything about electricity and figuring out how this was possible, the stories I heard online started to become far too real, because now the humming sound got louder. I couldn't tell exactly where it was coming from. With so many rooms, it was impossible to pinpoint. But my best guess was that it had something to do with the room that had a light on. I had no other option. I had to go inside it. I crept towards it and peeked my eyes inside, seeing what looked like a recovery room. There were small beds lined up against the walls, maybe 6 or 7 of them, kid-sized with metal frames and thin, dirty mattresses. Some still had sheets on them, stained with age. But from what I could see at the moment, there were no people, so there was still some explaining to do. The light was still flickering inside there, making you think that at any second, a jump scare was about to happen when it flickered on. And just as I was thinking about that, everything I've ever believed about ghosts or the supernatural or whatever you want to call it changed. Because as I went back into the hallway and flashed my light down the long walkway, I saw something. A small figure, maybe 3 feet tall at most. It looked like a child, wearing what appeared to be a hospital gown, the kind that ties in the back and hangs down to your knees. His skin was pale, almost blush in my flashlight beam. Too far away to make out any other details than that, but close enough to tell what it was. For just a second, it couldn't have been any more than that, I saw him. I quickly panned the flashlight another direction because of how terrified I was, and when I shined it back a few seconds after realizing what I thought I just saw, he was gone. I went over towards where I saw him, but by the time I got there, the only thing that was left was a cold spot in the air. My mind has played some pretty weird tricks on me before in these situations, but if this was one of them, that was by far the most messed up. But I don't think it could have been a trick based off what would happen just a few moments later, because I stood there for a minute, trying to process what I had just seen. Now, curiosity turned into paranoia. While I was in there, I was so invested that I never took a step back and was like, oh my gosh, I'm in an abandoned hospital that may be haunted at nighttime. By myself. What am I doing? After actually thinking about this rationally for the very first time and going through what just happened, I decided it was now really time to leave. I thought going back to my car would fix all my problems, but that was far from the case. Because the whole time I was going back towards the first floor, I still could hear the humming. Louder at certain moments, a little more quiet during others, but it was consistent. I crawled right back through the same window I'd used to get in, scraping my hand on a piece of broken glass that gave me a scar I still have today. I don't even know if you guys could see that, but it's right there. Okay, right there. So can you see it? I don't know. Oh, okay, whatever. But I didn't even notice it until after the adrenaline all wore off. I got the door open to my car and jumped inside, locking it immediately, just trying to process everything, including what was real and what wasn't. I didn't want it to end up like a dream where after a while, you can't remember certain details of it. So I sat there for a few minutes just trying to catch my breath and make sense of what just happened. There had to be a logical explanation, right? Maybe someone was playing a prank on me. Plenty of people explored this hospital before. Maybe there was just people that would hum creepy noises and create weird shadows to spook visitors. Or maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me. But no, that couldn't have been the case. Because as I sat there trying to calm down, I figured it was time to go home and relax. So I started my car, but before I left, I looked up at the hospital one more time. And what I saw changed me forever. On the 4th floor, right in that same area where the surgical wing was located, a single light was on in one of the windows. A light that definitely wasn't on when I arrived. The rest of the building was completely dark, except for that one window. I stared at it, unable to look away, and that's when I saw a shadow move across the light. I backed out of that parking lot faster than when the vegans were after me. I didn't care where I was going. I was driving like SpongeBob during his license test. I just needed to get away from whatever was inside Linda Vista Hospital. I still don't know exactly what I saw that night and how much of it was real, but I can tell you, I've never had an experience that felt this vivid. But the creepiest part, if this video gets 30,000 likes, I'll go back and record my whole experience.